Alright, someone asked me to take a look at Marlon Brando, so let us start off with a photo showing that he does appear to have aged in a way that makes me feel very much like he is a man. He's got a large skull, he's got a wide dental arch, fair gap between the nose and the mouth, quite a defined large nose as well as ear. The skull does look quite like we've got strong kind of bones in the skull. We do appear to have a bit of a brow ridge here. The brow is heavy and low, which is also something you typically see on men. On women, often the eyebrows will just be a little bit higher and there just won't be this same kind of heaviness. He's definitely got a long forehead, which is more of a male dimension. Again, the gap between the nose and the mouth, quite a wide mouth, quite a long, kind of broad chin. The face is long in a way that's consistent with male faces. We do appear to have a bit of a brow ridge here. We also do have quite high cheekbones, and the facial structure is not so much of a kind of gaunt structure, but it is very strong, and there is a definition along the jawline. And you definitely do have prominent cheekbones as well. You always have to be careful looking at the digit ratio when hands are bent in any way, but I would say it's looking like there's a longer ring finger than index here, so that's a male digit ratio. You can also see development in the neck here. Right, so again, the heavy brow, the long forehead, doesn't look like we have a widow's peak, which is not only found on women, but it's more common on women, so if you don't see it on a man, it's definitely not suspicious. Here, based on the highlight here and the shape, the way that this line connects with the neck, you can tell this is a built-up trapezius muscle. It's not a female sloping shoulder at the skeletal level. And we do appear to have quite squared across shoulders here. He does have fairly full lips, but as I've mentioned before, on men, typically the upper lip won't be quite as full as the lower lip, whereas on women, typically both lips will be about the same size. So if it was a female of the same genetic descent as he has, then you'd expect that the upper lip would still be yet a little fuller than what you're seeing here. Again, he does have a very kind of square, strong kind of skull structure. As mentioned, the smaller upper lip, the wide mouth, very wide spaced eyes, which is much more typical of males. I believe this is one of his wives. I'm not really going to look at the wives in this video, because personally I don't think that they always pair transgenders with each other. I think that sometimes it might be a matter of just appearance, or if they're real people, maybe they're allowed to choose to some degree. Maybe it's all choreographed, I don't know, but I won't go too far into talking about her, but it does look like we've got a kind of tall, vertical forehead. From the attire, it would appear that she's from South Asia, possibly India or somewhere around there. And I have noticed that women from that region often have a bit of a brow ridge. So, their features don't quite match with people of European descent. Often people from that region of the world will also have very large eyes. So, this is looking like a real female to me from that region of the world. Kind of softer facial structure. I'm inclined to think this is probably a real woman. And, he's looking like a real man, so I believe this was another one of his wives. I suppose she's from the islands, based on the attire. The knees look suitably female. People from that region will also have longer arms. People from those regions often also will have features kind of more in alignment with East Asian facial types, where there's not a lot of bones sticking out, but more kind of a flatter, smoother appearance. I do believe her face is looking consistent with a female from that region, so... Okay, so also typically Caucasians seem to have smaller heads than a lot of indigenous peoples do, so I'm not going to say that this head size is particularly suspicious. It is possible that this is a transgender person. Any of the women he was involved with could have been, and that doesn't mean necessarily that he also was transgendered. I think that a lot of men in positions of power and prestigious men, possibly actors, they might be required in some way to be paired with certain people and it could be transgendered people, you know? We can't know for certain, and so I would say it's not wise to look at one person, say they're transgendered, and then just assume the partner is. So, you know, I'm not going to make a definitive judgment on his partners, but his appearance to me is looking suitably male. He does have this brow ridge, and as I've mentioned before, sometimes men from certain regions of the world will have a bit of a rounded shape to the upper part of the skull. And I've even seen men with pretty vertical foreheads, so we really have to take genetics into account when we're analyzing people's physical appearance. So if one feature is anomalous, but the rest are in alignment, I think that's really important to make judgments with everything in mind, not just fly off the rails because one thing doesn't fit. Because people in everyday life are quite frequently going to have one thing that doesn't fit, or a couple things that don't fit even. So that's why it's important to look at the whole picture. I suppose this is another one of the wives. You know, I would say this is just a slight line from turning the neck. Don't have huge development in the trachea, softness around the face. You know, it could be a woman, maybe not. It's not really the most important thing whether his partners were females or not. And we can tell the shoulders are wide, we've got a broad back. The hips appear to be totally straight down. He's cocking this hip out to the side, and this side is totally straight, so the posterior is looking male to me, and also the width of the hips is considerably narrower than where we've got the shoulder bones up above on both sides. Again, he's got a straight body line, seeing the Adam's apple, thick trachea, again with the big skull, the strong facial structure, broad shoulders, broader than the hips. And this is a very deceptive pose. He's totally throwing the hip out to one side, and if someone stands in this way, it's going to push all the flesh forward, so it makes it appear as though there's more of a curve there. But if you look at the actual torso, that's the telling bit. Because the torso line is totally straight, down from a broad chest, and then the navel looks like it'd be about here, and then where we've got the hips is much lower, so that is still a male body line, just the pose is quite deceptive, and as this appears to be some kind of possibly a photo shoot or something, I wouldn't be surprised if they'd done that on purpose, because this kind of posing could help to disguise the ftms they might have had at the time. So, you know, when they developed the fashion they used and the posing they used and everything, they didn't just do it to disguise the transgenders to look like regular people, but they would do the same the opposite way. They'd try and make the regular people appear more like the transgenders of the time, and blurred the boundaries that way. It does look like we've got fairly large feet. Again, there's definition around the jaw. He's got a totally straight torso and back right up until the male posterior, and very thick-looking wrists and strong-looking hands. You know, this musculature is looking suitably male. The skin quality looks male as well. Does look like we've got a broad chest. Seeing a bit of the wave in the neck, and looks like we've got the proper Adam's apple and trachea in there, just kind of in shadow. You can also see collarbone here, again with the brow ridge and the strong facial structure. I've said it before and I'll say it again, it's a matter of them trying to blend the regular people in with the transgenders. I think they would have picked people who, for the men, they would come across as kind of pretty boys. For the women, they'd come across as strong women, like masculine women with really strong facial structures. So they did that at the beginning quite frequently, and there's still a few cases where they do that now. The important thing is to really check out all the features on the face and the body, and look at the energy in the eyes, and here, this is a very intense projected male energy. I'm not seeing female energy from this person. Shoulders being crunched in here with this pose, but check out how huge this ribcage is and how broad the shoulders are. Even crunched in, you can tell that the shape here is wider than where we've got the hips here. Legs are being pulled forward so it increases the apparent volume of the legs and hips, but the actual width of the hips is narrow, and there's no curve to this torso, to this body, until after the navel, significantly after. So this guy's got a totally straight male body line until down here, where we've got the hips. Kneecaps really sticking out here, defined calf muscle as well. He does have very believable looking kind of male musculature, and looks like we've got a thick neck. Again, the built up trapezius muscles, same facial features as mentioned before, and again the totally straight male back right up until the male posterior. Again the broad chest, strong looking joints, Adam's apple, male looking face. Of course, suits have shoulder pads in them, but you can tell that the actual width of the shoulder bones is probably right about here, and the hip bones will be in here at this point, so definitely we've got wider shoulders than hips, which is a very important dimension to look at on either males or females. Now this definitely looks like a little boy to me. It's got a very male appearance and a very male energy. Again, fingers being bent, but I do think we're seeing a male digit ratio with the longer ring finger, indicative of a higher testosterone level. Again, as I've mentioned before, some men in some regions of the world will have this kind of rounded appearance to the upper skull, but there is still that natural male brow ridge. It's always important to consider genetic heritage when looking at people. And again, the totally straight male torso, nothing weird about the chest. Again, crunching in the shoulders, but you can tell that the actual width of the hips down here, even with all this folded over fabric and such, is just not as wide as these shoulders. You can also tell that we've got totally straight male legs. There is no defined Q angle here, as you would expect on a female. Here he's leaning back a bit, similar to the thing we see MTFs do to try and create a curved appearance to their back, which is what you see here, just a bit of a curve inward, but there's no curve outward past that point, which you would expect on a female back. So again, the space in the rib cage, just looking like a pretty lean-built guy. Same thing here with the pretty big hands. Obviously tilted away from us in this picture, so you can't really make a judgment regarding the shoulder width, but there is nothing anomalous about the chest either. It's not looking strange. Yeah, you can make a judgment on the shoulders, and we've got these squared across collarbones, a chest that fits these wide shoulders. It's just broad as well, and then a totally straight torso coming down until a low point when we have the moderate curve of normal male hips. Only on the side where he's stepping forward, and on this side it actually looks totally straight. The neck is looking suitably long, the built up trapezius muscles. The arms are also long enough as well. You look at the crotch level here, take it across, reaches to the wrist bone, which is typical male arm length. Again, there's no defined Q angle in these legs, so that indicates that he's got a narrow male pelvis and hips, and so his legs are straight down as males typically are. The shoulders, again, are broader than the hips. Again, there's nothing strange looking about the chest. You can see the proper male development in the neck. He's got the fairly typical male look of a few veins here and there, but not in a scary degree, like you'll see in FTMs who are on steroids. Again, the wide mouth, the wide set eyes, the brow ridge, the long forehead, the long face, the defined nose, kind of broadness to the nose, large ears, long looking neck, lack of a widow's peak, and all the same things, the broader shoulders, then the hips, totally straight male legs, quite a long torso, arms the correct length for a male, large skull, but we could also fit 3 skull sizes on these shoulders, definition to the knees, thanks to a lower level of body fat and muscle built up around these regions, legs looking lean and male. Depending on the angle you see it at, it's going to look different, but the leg is totally straight here. There is no female Q angle. The hips are narrow. There's just proper male muscle development all over. The specimen looks very male. A female sitting in this pose would not have this, you can see a little gap where the light's coming through in the shot here. She would not have this kind of flatness to the legs. She would not have this narrowness to the hips. FTMs always have hips that are too wide, and you can tell when they're sitting down, because female hips will curve out and expand from a high point, and even the FTMs still have that. So when you see someone with straight legs like this, narrow hips, there's no curve to the back, the shoulders are broad, it's because it's a male body. And again, the proper male development of the neck. And the use of testosterone will lengthen the lower half of the face on females, and it will cause development of some traits like a mild brow ridge and an Adam's apple in some users. The results are not the same in every person, and they are typically unconvincing, but this actually looks like a legitimate male face. Same things here, the prominent cheekbones, the strong facial structure, the length of the face, the heavy brow and brow ridge, male-looking neck. Same things here about the hips. There would be a curve inward and a curve outward if it was a female, but instead you've just got the straight torso going down to where we've got some puffy pockets, but, narrow hips. Now, I've mentioned before the fashion of the era was used to make the males appear more like the FTMs, because in this time period in particular, they loved their really baggy suit trousers. Actually, usually they're worn up a lot higher about where the female waist indentation would be, because that was the most effective way to disguise the FTMs, is to make regular men wear the trousers just as high, so it would appear that because of this puffy thing, it would appear that regular men had more of a curve at the hips as well, like the FTMs did. But here, as he's wearing them lower, you can tell that he's got this kind of inverted triangle shape, which is a very typical male body shape. It's got the straight torso. The only, there's a slight bulge here where we have an oblique muscle far underneath the navel. The actual hips are not as wide as these trousers suggest, but even if they were, they'd be far too low for what's consistent with a female skeleton, and there's no female waist indentation at a high point. Again, space in the ribcage, broad chest, wide shoulders, long neck, male facial traits, and again all these strong male facial traits, very male-looking skin quality. He does have a very rugged masculine appearance and is aged in a way that looks extremely male. He doesn't look like he's falling apart with age. He doesn't have any strange things like uneven eyes that might indicate hormone abuse. Everything about this guy looks natural and male. And again, even with the legs spread, we're not seeing any curve at the hips at this height, which you would expect on a female sitting in this pose. And these fingers and hands look very male. There's the proper kind of vein development on a male. Strong knuckles, a thinner shape between the knuckles, just a sturdy hand look overall. Again, the wide shoulders, everything, this is just looking very male. Same things here, again the straight back, the skeletal curve cannot be changed. So if you see a skeleton with a male straight back, a male narrow pelvis, and a lack of a female Q angle, it's because it's a male skeleton. Again with the totally straight torso, the bunched up trousers at this point. This is just a bit of gathered flesh cinched in by the top of these trousers here. But in order for that to be suspicious, you'd have to have it on both sides, and you'd have to have the hips continuing out past that point. This is just consistent with a male body that's moving and bending in a few ways. There's nothing strange about the chest shape. On FTMs, you'll typically have drooping, sagging, or really strange, uneven shapes and too much gathered together in one region. But on a male chest, I find this kind of even look where it's not all gathered in one region. It's kind of more squared across. Since he's moving this arm back, this side of the chest is more stretched, but there's nothing strange looking about this. Again, the defined bone structure, the proper Adam's apple, the male neck, the male face. Same things here. Male body line, male dimensions, and again, looking very much like a little boy. Now here, the torso line is totally straight on both sides if you follow not the brightness of this, if you follow the actual line of the body here, comes down totally straight on both sides, pushing out this hip a bit, but there's no excessive wideness, just totally straight. There's There's no female Q angle, straight legs. It's a very male body. Same thing here, we don't have a female curve to the back. We've got these wide shoulders, these narrow hips, straight torso on both sides. Again, the arm length is consistent with a male arm length. Okay, so let's start from the top and go down. All the male facial traits I've mentioned before. You could definitely fit 3 head sizes on these broad shoulders with a defined bone structure. A slope that is only caused by built-up trapezius muscles and not a skeletal structure. Long male neck with an Adam's apple and development in the trachea. A broad male chest with squareness across. Proper male musculature and long-looking arms. A torso that's totally straight down to very low male hips below the navel. He's bending a little bit to this side, and this leg is being bent back a little bit. So that paired with the shorts cutting into the flesh a little bit has again created this little bulge of flesh, but that's just flesh. The actual bone structure is not indicative of any female curves. Again, if you follow it on this line, you'll see that as well. The male pelvis nip bone appears to be right about here, which is narrower than where we've got the shoulder bones at a broader point. It's a very strong-looking male legs. He's placing them a little bit more one in front of the other in order to do this jump rope. But if you look at just the legs, you'll see how straight they are. This is not a female Q angle. Got the defined knees, the proper male musculature. And if you check out from about where the crotch level is, that's a long male torso as well. And just so nobody gets deceived by the quadriceps muscles here, which create a slight curve, but that's just out of muscle, I just want to point that out, that this is muscle built up around here on the thighs, but the actual leg itself is very straight. You follow the line of the leg all the way down. There's no curving inward, as you'd see on a female with a female Q angle. Also for this shot, I want to point out that the detailing on the chest doesn't look the same as in the other pictures that we've got of this person, but this is due to the pose. If you look at the fact that the hands and the arms are brought forward in this picture, then essentially what we've got is the pectorals are being flexed, so they're being squeezed more to the center of the chest. But this is the result of muscular bunching up. This is not just that it's a strange look to begin with, because as we've seen in other photos, the detailing and the spacing of the pectorals and everything does look normal, so this kind of motion is what's causing this appearance here, as you can see here with the fact that the detailing doesn't look quite the same in this shot, so the previous shot was clearly just caused by motion. You can see he's got the proper Adam's apple with a few different ridged portions. You can see it in several shots. And again, the strong male jaw. There is a slope to the brow and a brow ridge. The facial structure is just broad and strong overall. Neck is pretty long, and we could definitely fit 3 head widths on these shoulders here. You can also tell that the ring finger is longer than the index finger. And the hands themselves do look very male too. So sturdy knuckles and kind of thinness between the knuckles. Just kind of broadness and large size to them. And when he's not wearing the suit trousers that in these days they wore up to about this point, and they were always so baggy, so it made it appear like they had more hips. If he's wearing these jeans here, you can see that the body line is just totally straight. The torso is straight, and the hips are straight. There's no female curvature on this person. The shoulders are clearly wider than the hips, significantly wider. This apparent slope here is just the trapezius muscles built up, and you can tell the actual bone structure is quite square and broad. Again, you could fit 3 head widths on these shoulders. Again, the straight male body. There's no curvature along here. The legs are straight, the torso is straight, the hips and pelvis are considerably narrower than the shoulders. Same thing here. The shoulders, where the actual bones in the shoulders are, is wider than where we've got the bones in the hips, the pelvis. It's a male ratio. He's popping this hip out to the side, and the fabric of the trousers is gathered as well, but you can see in other shots of this person, he doesn't have a wide Q angle, he's got straight legs. And again, it does look like the ring finger is slightly longer than the index finger, which is a male digit ratio. Back straight from the side. Looks very straight from the back. Very broad. This is an extremely broad, wide back, and it's significantly broader and wider than the hips. So that's a male ratio right there. Now on these trousers, I noticed that the pockets are quite puffy. They stick out to the sides, so from the front especially, it makes the appearance of the hips of these trousers look wider. But if you look from the back, you can tell there's just some loose fabric around here, but his hips really aren't wide. So from the broad male shoulders, you have the body gradually coming in, but there's no high female waist indentation. It's just a straight male body. Same with the back, it's just totally straight down until right where you have the male posterior. There's nothing strange going on here. Got space in the ribcage as well, which is a male trait, designed to allow them to intake more oxygen, to be more physically active. And again, the arm length is looking acceptable for where the crotch level would be about here, I reckon. So yes, in these trousers, they're the same as in the last shot, and as mentioned, the pockets are really puffy on these trousers, so it makes it appear as though the hips are wider, but if you look from other angles, you'll see that this is actually just the fabric of the clothing. This is something that was done quite frequently with the trousers in these time periods, is actually frequently they'd be worn up higher as well, so it would just appear like there are these wide female hips all the way down, but that is not the case. These trousers have empty space where the fabric is. His actual body is not too curved for a male. Since we can see the navel here, you can also see that the torso is just totally straight on both sides. Defined bone structure along here in the shoulders. As mentioned, a fairly long neck, and there's not a structural female skeletal slope to the shoulders, but there is built up trapezius muscle. The pectorals look proper, they're squared across, the kind of square, broad shape that matches the width of the chest overall. So yes, with these trousers, they have this bagginess, and then they have these pockets that puff out, so it makes it appear as though there's more roundness to this region. But still, even with that, it's significantly narrower than what we've actually got up here in the back and the shoulders. So this is a very deceptive fashion that was used to make the actual males appear more like the ftms. This is very common in the media. They'll have all these kinds of fashions that are used to make biological males and females more closely approximate the look that transgenders have, partially to make them all blend in, and partially so they can just work to changing the public's idea of what's normal for a gender. But again, here you can see it's just got a very straight back, right until the male posterior. Definitely got space in the ribcage. This is definitely a male torso. Male legs. Arms are looking long and male as well. It does have a brow ridge and an Adam's apple. All the same, Adam's apple, defined trachea, long neck, square shoulders. You know, the puffy trousers as always, but you've seen the actual body shape and it isn't indicative of any female form. The male brow ridge, the strong male facial structure, the male neck shapes. And again, this guy, when posing with his hip out to the side, also has a totally straight torso and totally straight legs. So this person put on weight as he aged, but putting on weight is not something restricted to females. And when people age and develop different kinds of health problems, you know, things will happen to their bodies, and people do not look the same when they age as when they're young. But the fact is, when he was aging and getting out of shape and everything, he didn't change to look female. That's the thing, he just put on weight. It is possible for men to put on weight, especially if they have, I don't know, a thyroid problem or something. But the fact is, saying that only females can gain weight is very strange, because that is not at all in accordance with reality. So when you take a look at all the features in conjunction, the bodily traits, the facial traits, and the energy in the eyes, Marlon Brando is quite obviously a real male. They try to disguise it as much as possible, they try to blend in the real males with the fake males, just as they do with the females and the fake females. I don't have any doubt that Marlon Brando was a real male. And that's that.